Hi everyone, this video is for Mercury in Sagittarius, and I know a few things about this because I happen to have this placement. Mercury is the planet of communication, so how you express yourself, your ideas to others, how you listen, take in information from others as well as from other sources of knowledge, if you will. How do you take in that knowledge? And how does it get processed in your mind to formulate certain opinions or, storing information for future use? Just what is on your mind, what you like, what is on your tongue, what you like to talk about as well. So Sagittarius is a mutable fire sign. And before I continue, if your Mercury is in Sagittarius, then your Sun may also be in Sagittarius, like it is for me, but it could also be, your Sun could also be in Scorpio, or it could be in Capricorn. And so this will kind of modify those Sun signs because of this Mercury in terms of how other people interact with them. And, I really, when I was thinking about doing this series of videos, I didn't really place much importance on Mercury, and now I do. Now I realize how important it is because we're always communicating in one form or another with others. And it does form part of our image or how people perceive us. And it really does shape our own lives as well. So, being a mutable fire sign, Sagittarius is very enthusiastic. And in Mercury, I looked at a couple of websites just to kind of see what they would say about it. And I didn't see anybody say something which I personally do, which is use a lot of exclamation points. I think that fire signs tend to do that because they're kind of riled up, or they get very enthusiastic about whatever it is that they are talking about. And so that enthusiasm comes through in the speech. And also, there is this positivity that we could say along with enthusiasm that is true for all fire signs. And when I say Sagittarius or fire signs, I'm talking about Mercury in Sagittarius, but it can also be for some of those other personal planets. It can also, some of these traits that I'm mentioning are going to appear if your moon is in Sagittarius, Sun, Venus, what have you, but they're going to function slightly differently. Now, Mercury in Sagittarius is actually in its detriment, which means it's at its weakest function, in functionality. And that kind of surprised me when I was exploring these Mercury signs. I found out that in addition to Sagittarius, we have Pisces as well that has this weakest point. And this is because the detriment is opposing the signs where Mercury is in the sign that it rules. So the two signs that Mercury rules are Virgo and Gemini. The opposing signs of Virgo and Gemini are Pisces and Sag. And so they're in their detriment. Now, it's important to understand that this will not mean that if you have Mercury in Sagittarius that you will not be intelligent. Oh, hell to the no. It's not true. Neither will you necessarily be a poor communicator. It simply means that if you think about what is efficient, okay, so a well-functioning machine that is doing things very orderly, that's not going to be the case for Mercury in Pisces or Mercury in Sagittarius. Because with Mercury in Sagittarius, there is a desire for, taking in information coming from multiple sources. And this is probably due to the fact that Sagittarius is ruled by Jupiter, which is the planet of expansion. And it loves, the more the better, the more the merrier. But sometimes Jupiter can be excessive. And I'll just give you an example with me. I was just realizing the other day that I had checked out all these books from the library that I'm not reading. And then I have a whole bookshelf, shelves filled with books. And it's just like, collecting information or reading things excessively sometimes and not really perhaps honing in on a specific topic and getting deep with that topic, but just kind of like having a restless mind. This is one of the attributes, if you will. I don't know if a challenging thing can be an attribute. I guess it can. A scattered mind and an impractical mind. Now, these are some of these words I'm getting from other sources, and I would personally beg to differ about that because I believe that impracticality is in the eyes of the beholder. And, gathering wisdom to me may seem impractical to very grounded individuals who believe that this world is where it's at. But for those of us who consider ourselves visionaries, who are looking beyond the physical, what metaphysical means, we're not just that enamored by the mundane knowledge. So, what can you say? Some of these things I don't fully agree with, and that's okay. That brings to mind one of the other things that they mentioned, being very overbearing in one's opinions. Now, if you have Mercury in Sagittarius like me, do you think that there is a grain of truth in that? I plead guilty. Preachiness. And that can come across as arrogant. I think all fire signs can have a bit of an arrogant demeanor when they are expressing themselves, as if they are the moral authority, especially Sag, because it is the God house that we are connected to. But by the same token, there is a talent in expressing abstract ideas, philosophical ideas. And this has its place. The ninth house is also the house of university. So even though I didn't read any information about this specifically, I would imagine that a Mercury and Sagittarius person would be a natural for academia in the sense of being able to give lectures that are very expansive, that don't just stick to the actual core material, but bring in other threads. And to me, the greatest intellects are those who are interested in the liberal arts, because they are not just specializing in one thing, but they're seeing how everything is interconnected. And I don't see that as a weakness myself. I see that as a sign of wisdom. And I think that you can impart knowledge at its highest level when you are bringing in these other threads and not just hyper-focusing on one angle or one actual topic. So for instance, if you're teaching English literature and you talk about the historical goings-on at that time, the context, the historical context, that can add a whole new depth to the discussion because it brings out the motivation. What was happening at the time that contributed to this artistic influence. And it makes sense to me. But for some people, they see that as scattered. And I just don't see it that way. Of course, anything can be taken to the extreme, and certainly that could be true. But with Mercury in Sagittarius, there's a restlessness of the mind, and that is due to so much curiosity, being receptive to new information, the mutability of Sag. And the fact that Sagittarius is such a great cheerleader in terms of really being uplifting to other people, there's also humor associated with Sag. And sometimes this can lead to other people perceiving Mercury in Sagittarius as childish, because they may even joke about serious issues. And according to one of the sources that I used, they said, and that's true. And I, again, beg to differ. I do not believe that because you have a humorous perspective that makes you somehow childish. It might make you childlike, but there's a difference. If you have a sophisticated enough mind, you're not a child. And being able to frame things in a funny way, in a more lighthearted way, is good, because there's a lot of heaviness in this world. And I'm thinking right now of this, I think he's a Zen Buddhist monk. And he might be a famous one. I can't remember what his name is. But I have one of his books, or my partner has one of his books, and he loves this guy. I can't think of this guy's name, but if you see him on the cover, he's got like this smirk or this mischievous smile on his face. And I think that's not uncommon with Zen Buddhists. There's like this classic Buddhist literature called Zen Flesh, Zen Bones, and I highly recommend it. And it is hilarious. It's almost like these, they're riddles in a sense, but there's just so much wacky humor in it too. And it's philosophical, obviously. But to be too serious is to embrace duality. So to be able to see something that is serious and to still have this light-hearted expression on your face means that you understand that there's yin and yang, and that you also know that this too shall pass, not to take anything too seriously, because ultimately this life is temporary and it's unreal because of its temporal nature. So, it's real in this moment, obviously, but it's only lasting for whatever time it lasts. And so I understand why people would consider it childish to joke around. And maybe the lower expression of a Mercury and Sagittarius person who is not conscious at that level, maybe they would be too silly. Maybe there is a possibility for that. But I think that there's also the possibility that the person has innate wisdom, the Mercury and Sagittarius person, and they know that being, this is so heavy, that kind of mentality it doesn't serve you, and it isn't real. It's like believing the illusion, the Maya of life. So another thing that is considered a challenge with Mercury and Sagittarius is that they tend to hone in on the bigger picture. And so therefore, the details, which Mercury and Virgo would be like totally adept at, are, overlooked. Now, this is only problematic if you are working in an area where you have to be completely on point with your facts. Mercury in Sagittarius is completely capable of ignoring facts. But you know what? Again, my perspective as somebody with this placement is I don't really believe there are such things as facts. I grew up being taught that Pluto was a planet. Now it's been demoted, maybe to a dwarf planet or something like that. But it's not, things, even with so-called things in textbooks, what is the truth? What is the truth behind history? Are they really facts? What is claimed to be true about a specific incident in history? So in other words, truth is relative when we get right down to it, because we might not have been told the whole story. And so even like with things that we think are solid, that's why I mentioned science. There's always these theories that keep making the scientific so-called facts evolve. And that's okay. I think some people feel uncomfortable if certain things are not solid and, engraved in stone. I'm not like that. And anyone with Mercury and Sagittarius is completely comfortable with fluidity when it comes to the details of things, or even so-called facts. And this was a new one on me. I don't know about this, but they say that this is the sign most associated with social justice. And let me tell you something. I know that the ninth house does have some connection to the law, like the seventh house that Libra rules. But I would think much more likely that Libra would be connected to social justice, or Aquarius, the 11th house of humanitarianism. And Sagittarius having a penchant for maybe controversy and irreverence. I use the term social justice warrior freely and, early and often. And, so I do believe in justice, but I also know that we are spiritual beings having a human experience, and that I believe that everything is happening as it should be. And so injustice to me is really not much of a word to me personally. Okay. So I'm kind of challenging some of these so-called traits, but you may identify with them. So I'll give that to you. I don't want to be overbearing in my opinions. And another thing to watch out for is sarcasm. Sages are snarky. Mercury and Sag. Now, this is not meant maliciously, okay? Mercury and Scorpio can wound, and they can absolutely mean to wound, okay? Mercury and Sagittarius, it's usually that they go too far. And I know personally when I have said something and I was just teasing somebody and they took it personally and they were hurt by it, that's something that would make me feel really bad, because I would never want to hurt anybody intentionally. But there's that tendency to kind of tease somebody and then keep doing it and then finally go over the edge. And this can especially be a problem if you have hard angles to Mercury. So if you have squares or oppositions to Mercury and it's afflicted, you may have a tendency to do this more often, where the expressions are not coming off in a good way. Maybe I would say especially to Mars and to Pluto, which can be aggressive and, even sometimes cruel. So, these influences. So watch out for that. But I do believe that those of us with Mercury in Sagittarius are very interesting conversationalists, and that other people would enjoy listening to us, and that they would learn something from us. So going back to this idea that Mercury is in its detriment in Sagittarius, that may be true, but it doesn't mean that we are not capable of making other people think, giving them an uplifting message, which can raise their vibration. And also, this is a big one, really championing the truth. I am a big champion of authenticity in speech and in deeds. And to me, it's very important, regardless of what Mercury sign you have, regardless of what sun sign you have, to live authentically and to speak in truth. Speak truth to power, but speak truth for your own benefit as well. Because when you stand in your truth and stand for who you are, you can live life in a much more open way and free. I mean, that's what Sagittarius really wants at the end of the day, is freedom. And so freedom to express oneself in the United States, that's the First Amendment, is so important to Mercury and Sagittarius. And the last thing that I want to leave you with is, how does this affect you if your sun sign is in Scorpio? Well, it will make you much more positive in speech and in thought. You will tend to be much more uplifting to others and much less of that cutting, stinging scorpion that is kind of on the defensive a lot, suspicious, overly suspicious of others' motives, and maybe believing the worst in other people because of that Plutonian, connection of thinking, there's got to be some kind of dirt that this person is hiding, and I'm going to try to uncover it. No, in this particular case, you're going to try to promote the truth in life, but in that higher sense of the word. Because even if people they have a shadow self and they are hiding certain things that they're ashamed of, that isn't their truth. That is not their truth. If you expose somebody's shadow, that is not who they are. It's simply trauma, information that is not integrated within themselves. But that doesn't mean that they are bad people for having certain skeletons in the closet. And this is where Mercury and Scorpio and Mercury and Sagittarius differ. We're talking about a higher truth. And this is about our nature as souls, our nature in this world, like what we really came here to do at the end of the day. And so there's like kind of a lofty intellect that is not, because Pluto is the god of the underworld. So there's kind of like a seedy underbelly there. And Jupiter is this planet that is about growth rather than contraction, about morality, about honor. And so these kinds of things are very, to me, in that it's a yang energy, the Sagittarius. So it is kind of more out there rather than inner, and maybe secretive in the case of Scorpio. So I believe that this is something that really helps a Sun in Scorpio person to have this Mercury position. If you have a Sun in Sagittarius, this is going to enhance your philosophical nature, but it can enhance your scattered tendencies. And you may really benefit from something like meditation, or even writing things down so that you can be practical, because your head may be in the clouds so much of the time that you need to ground yourself, that you need to be more practical to function in this world. If and also too, I want to say one thing about Mercury and Sag in general is watch out for tactlessness. Kind of speaking without thinking first, because that can sometimes be offensive to others and also hurt a situation. If your sun sign is in Capricorn, this loosens your tendency to be so serious and to be so formal. This will give you a lot more flexibility instead of that rigidity. By the way, Scorpio is actually a fixed sign, so it is associated with rigidity. With Capricorn, it's more like being uptight, okay? And it'll loosen that and make you much more having fun, speaking with a jovial attitude instead of like a very strict type of a way that you go through life. And that can be very nice for people who are trying to uplift others, because the sign of Capricorn, you can really give a great presence. You come across as very solid and professional, and how else would I put it? Capable. There's another word I'm looking for. I don't know, purposeful. Somebody who's an authority on something. And yet, if you also have Mercury in Capricorn, it could be a little bit too severe. And this like loosens you up. It makes you more philosophical and more of that youthful, when I say youthful, I just think of someone who is spontaneous, more spontaneous, instead of like, the inner child coming out rather than the adult, which is the the Capricorn energy. So, yeah. Anyway, I hope that you guys enjoyed this. And if you'd like a private natal chart interpretation or any other kind of reading, the link is below for that. And thank you for listening. Take care. Bye.